Hello there. I'm really excited to introduce you to a new feature in ActiveWoo, and this is to support the GDPR compliance, also known as the upcoming EU law that requires a little bit more explicit opt-ins for marketing to people. And so I've been a very requested feature over the last month, as you can imagine, especially from all of the EU customers and everyone who wants to be in compliance with that law, as to how that's going to work with the Advanced Recover Card feature. Now, the Advanced Recover Card feature is what you're seeing here, and it's when someone gets to the checkout page, we first ask them for their name and email, or also name, email, and phone number. Optionally, you can add the phone number here. And when we do that and they hit next, we load the rest of the checkout page, but also behind the scenes, we are pushing the name and email at least into ActiveCampaign along with some tags. And optionally, expiring coupon codes so that you can send an email back to people who start but don't finish the checkout. Now, the GDPR law, it's going into effect, I believe, May 1st, so today if you're watching this video today. And because it's a brand new law, there's probably lots of stuff that's going to get changed and clarified as different things end up in courts and so forth. So as a disclaimer, I'm not a legal authority, and so you shouldn't take any of this information as specific legal advice. This is my best attempt to make your site as compliant as it can be with the GDPR laws. So what this does is, if you enable the feature, and this is of course optional, and I'm going to take you through all the options in a second, what happens is we can optionally surface a checkbox and some text, and you have control over what that text says, not only so that you can frame it how you want, but also so that it supports the native language of your site. And what happens is now someone has to put in their name and email, and they have to explicitly check that box, and when they do that and click next, then we will send that information into ActiveCampaign. If they do the first name and an email and do not click this box, then no information is pushed into ActiveCampaign, and therefore nothing is saved. And I think that's one of the key parts of the GDPR law, is that if there's no explicit opt-in, you're not allowed to store that person's contact information anywhere. And so that's what this does. If someone comes to your site and you have this feature enabled, they put in their name, email, hit next, which I'll do now. So I'll put in my name and email, and I won't check this box, and hit next. The checkout page loads up, and there you have it. Nothing, and let's say we just close the page and don't complete the checkout. There's no record of this transaction anywhere on any of your systems, and I believe that's what you want for the GDPR compliance. So that's the main feature. Now, there's another feature that we also have always had on the checkout page, and that is to also optionally subscribe to a newsletter, some sort of additional opt-in checkbox. So even if you're not using the Advanced Recover Card, or you choose to hide it from everyone in the EU, you still also have the option using ActiveWoo to also show an explicit opt-in, to opt into something like a newsletter. Now, the part of the GDPR that I think is going to get clarified over these next few months is when somebody makes a purchase from your site and they put their email address into the form here, obviously WooCommerce is already storing that email address. And I don't believe there's any violation of GDPR to also store that email address in ActiveCampaign, and there's a lot of reasons you might want to do that, even if you don't send that person any additional marketing. One of the main ones being, if you were running a marketing campaign where somebody did opt into a web form, let's say to get like a 15% off coupon, and then completes the purchase, you might want to then update that record in ActiveCampaign as success. We advertised an offer, we got their email, sent the email offer to them, they clicked it, they made the purchase, and you want to update so that you can sort of see, and complete the automation in ActiveCampaign in that example. So that's one use case at least of why it's important to make sure that you are going to sync your email into ActiveCampaign regardless of whether or not you show the newsletter subscription or not. We will always continue to sync the email address and tags into ActiveCampaign for you regardless of the GDPR law. So that's the other thing too that I wanted to get clear at the start of the video. So now let's dive in to the settings of how we do the recover card. All right, so in your WooCommerce settings, you have an integration tab, and that is where you find the advanced recover cart features. Once you update to this latest version, which is 1.6.0, if you've already got this enabled, then this will still be showing as enabled, but then you will have a new display condition. The default is always display recover cart. That's the default. When you update to version 1.6, there's no change to the front end of your site. Everything is going to work just as it has been, meaning there will be no recover cart opt-in checkbox. In order to make the checkbox show, you have to choose one of these options, which is always display explicit opt-in and checkbox in text. So once we set this, we then see the opt-in text, and then we can set that text right there. Right, so if I update that to say something like support your purchase now, just showing it to you so that I can, oops. Okay, so now again it shows the checkbox and all that text. So that's your first option. Always display it. For those of you who are in the EU, this is probably your best option, is to always display that explicit opt-in. Your other option is, if you're in the EU, you might want to go this way, which is hide recover cart from EU IP addresses. This means if someone is in the EU, their IP address should show or should be within a certain range. And we have updated your database with a list of IP addresses of known IP addresses from the EU. This is not 100% totally accurate. There will be some EU IP addresses that are not in this list, but it's probably better than 95-97% accurate as to if somebody hits your site and they're in the EU, the IP address will match, and we will then just completely hide the recover cart. That means that when they visit your site, they won't see this. It will load the checkout page as if you hadn't turned the feature on. But if somebody is outside the EU, if they're from Canada, Australia, the United States, wherever, then it will show, and it will show without this checkbox. Right? So when we choose the enable cart recovery, hide recover cart from the EU IP addresses, what we're doing there is we're saying, yeah, we don't love the idea of this checkbox, so let's do this. If someone's in the EU, just don't even show this whole part. Just load the order form and don't do the recover cart step at all. If they're outside the EU, then we load the recover cart, no additional checkbox. So anyone who puts their first, last, and email in here will be synced and stored in ActiveCampaign. So that's that setting. Okay, your next option is to display the explicit opt-in and checkbox in text to EU IP addresses. So when we have this setting, if you're outside of the EU and you load this page, it looks just like this. We're outside the EU, so we don't see it. If you're inside the EU, then it's going to show the checkbox. So for me, as a United States-based business who still wants to be both in compliance with the GDPR law, but also, so that my site looks comfortable to what will soon become the expectation of EU customers, they're going to start to expect to see explicit opt-ins anywhere that you're requiring an email address. And so for me to be in that culture, then I am going to choose the enable cart recovery, display explicit opt-in, and text to EU IP addresses. So if you're in the EU visiting the ActiveWoo site, you should see that checkbox when you go to checkout. If you're outside of the EU, then you won't see it. And again, not 100% accurate. It's possible that you will hit my site and it will still show. But again, I'm not as worried about running afoul of the GDPR law. I don't exactly know how they plan to enforce it on small US-based businesses. I highly doubt that they'll be able to effectively do that. And that's my personal tolerance for risk. So I would prefer to lower my risk as much as possible, but I still very much believe that the recover cart wins back sales, and many of the people who use ActiveWoo have also told me that the recover cart definitely has boosted sales and is more than paid for the cost of the plugin itself. So that's why I built these features as they are. This is the one that I specifically wanted myself to show cart recovery to everybody, and if you're in the EU, then I'm going to show the opt-in box. If you're outside the EU, I'm not going to show it. Okay, the next part of this video is also already on the, and if you're not familiar with this URL, all of the instructions on how to use all of the ActiveWoo features can be found on this URL, which is activewoo.com/members/installation-instructions. And this video will be added to that page too. But what we're covering in this video, because it's pertinent to the GDPR discussion, is the opt-in for the newsletter subscription and how all those settings work. So we're going to hop over to the advanced settings, and this works somewhat independently of the advanced recover cart. So whether or not you're using advanced recover cart and you're in the EU, or you want to be compliant with the EU privacy laws, then watch this part as well about the newsletter subscription toggle. So the first step is to enable the enable newsletter subscribe checkbox. Again, if you intend to send marketing to somebody, just because somebody purchases and gives you their email as part of the purchase, that doesn't necessarily indicate an explicit permission to market something like a newsletter. Again, where the GDPR law is going to need to get more specific, and a lot of this is going to have to get tested out in the courts, is going to be, if I send you an email to let you know that you're shipping, that your item should be shipping soon, and I put a coupon in that email, is that a transactional email or is that marketing? And the truth is, it's a little bit of both. So a lot comes down to, you have to, in order to break the law, you have to be caught, which means you have to significantly upset one of your customers enough that they report you. I'm guessing. Again, I'm not a legal expert, but as a business person, this is how I think through these things and how I adjust risk on my end. So not legal advice by any means, but this is how I approach the thoughts and how I use that to inform my decisions on how to build the ActiveWoo product. So me personally, I do not do very much marketing to the ActiveWoo list. I keep these emails in order to keep you up to date with updates like this one. So if you receive this email, that's because I use ActiveCampaign to keep my customers up to date with new features and everything in the product. Is that marketing? I suppose if you haven't renewed your license and you see this video and it prompts you to want to renew your license, maybe that's marketing. I really don't know. So anyway, for those who do have newsletters and who want the explicit opt-in, not only have we synced your email in order to do something like update an automation to let that automation, for example, stop sending maybe the next 3 emails that had been planned in order to incentivize you to purchase the product. We know that you've made the purchase, so now we want to switch to a new automation or just cancel that automation. So once again, remember, regardless of whether you toggle the newsletter on or off, ActiveWoo will always sync the email and tags on purchase completion. So what this does is, first, when we save it, is it's going to add something to the checkout page. This was a requested feature from long ago. Originally, we had to do this with another plugin, and we just built it native because so many people did want this. So it adds a subscribe to newsletter checkbox to the bottom of the billing address part of the checkout here. So where this actually appears on yours depends a little bit on how your theme has laid out this page, but generally it's down here, and it doesn't have to say subscribe to newsletter, and I recommend you do update this text. So you want to update that text to something like subscribe to newsletter for exclusive coupons or something like that. And again, if you go to the installation instructions page, you will find videos on how to do things like create expiring coupons. So you can advertise the coupon feature in at this point. So you give them not only a reason to let them know that they're subscribing to the newsletter, but give them a reason to do so, right? So you would update that label here. And also, of course, if your site's not in English, then you can put your, you can write that in whatever native language you have on the site. All right. The next feature that I want to cover actually is down here, and that is whether or not to subscribe the newsletter toggled on. So right now it's toggled on, meaning when the page loads, you're already subscribed to the newsletter. Now, for GDPR laws, that's not how we want to do it. For GDPR compliance, it needs to be an explicit opt-in, meaning this needs to load unchecked, so that someone has to physically click that before and then complete the purchase. So, so that's that setting. Now, the next setting is the subscribe to newsletter tag, and so that's pretty self-explanatory. If you have, as soon as they tick this box and then complete the purchase, we're going to apply this tag. Whatever a tag you've assigned here is the tag that's going to be assigned in ActiveCampaign, and that lets you know that in fact they did toggle this on when they submitted the order form, and so now you can tag them as being subscribed to your newsletter or subscribed to essentially receive additional marketing outside of purely transactional emails. Now we have another setting here, which is kind of optional, but if you have somebody who's already subscribed to your newsletter, let's say they subscribed months and months ago and kind of forgot that they subscribed, and they come to your checkout page and this is left unchecked, and then they submit the form, does that mean that they should stay subscribed, or should they become unsubscribed because they left this empty? I don't know the answer to that question, but the feature is here if you want to answer that question in the definitive, which is if somebody submits my order form, and they left that box unchecked, or if they unchecked it, then I do want to say, I want to apply this tag and I do want them unsubscribed. You can do that by setting a tag here. Now, of course, this is all taken care of in your automations. All ActiveWoo is doing is setting this tag. If this tag isn't tied to anything, then all you've done is just add another tag to the contact. So remember, this doesn't actually remove them from any lists. If you wanted to do that, then what you would need to do is create an automation in ActiveCampaign that starts with, when this tag is applied, unsubscribe from these lists. So I don't know what your lists are, and there's already a killer user interface to program and automate what happens when this tag gets applied, and that stuff is all already in ActiveCampaign, which is why it's not built directly into ActiveWoo. All you need ActiveWoo for is to set the tag, and then you can take it from there inside of ActiveCampaign. Finally, we have this really cool feature, which is if you are using the Advanced Recover Cart, what you can do is you can say that when they submit that first step, we get their first name and their email, and then they push the next button. We're going to check for this tag. So we first call to the ActiveCampaign database and we say, does this email already exist in the contacts? And if it does, and if that contact already has this tag, then even though we've chosen to show the Enable Newsletter Subscribe checkbox, for this particular customer, we will hide it to not give them the option to unsubscribe from here. So we don't have to worry about this. If the newsletter tag is not subscribed, we'll just ignore that setting altogether because the whole entire checkbox will just not appear for them. Now, this is an important caveat as this interacts a little bit with the new GDPR feature. The way that ActiveWoo 1.6 is set up is that if they do not tick the box, then for now we are not making any API calls into ActiveCampaign at all. I do think this will be an updated feature that I'll put into a 1.6.1 or 1.6.2 release, so it will come in the near future. But for now, just if you're testing this, remember that for the first iteration of this, if you have the Advanced Recover Cart enabled, and you have it set up so that EU people are required to tick that box when they submit the first step of the order form. If the box is not ticked, then we don't make any call to ActiveCampaign, which means that we won't be checking to see if that email address is or is not already subscribed. We're not going to be able to look for this tag because we're not making any call to ActiveCampaign at that point. So the checkout page will load. If you have the Enable Newsletter Subscribe box checked, then the whole thing is just going to load up. It's as if the Recover Cart wasn't turned on. Okay, so that covers the checkout GDPR compliance for ActiveWoo. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being an ActiveWoo user. Thank you for all the feedback, product suggestions, and just in general, any news about how ActiveWoo has improved your business is always super appreciated. I hope in the near future I can send an email to you to ask for any kind of testimonials. For now, I'm still pretty busy building out features and everything, and haven't gotten much chance to update the site. So thank you most of all for spreading the word and telling other people and other WooCommerce users about ActiveWoo. A lot of people do find it through word of mouth, and so I very much appreciate that. And wish you all the best with dealing with the overall new GDPR laws, and of course wish you all the best with your site and your e-commerce business.